All right, cool. So this isn't going to be a talk about using John. I think most people in this room use it. If you don't know how to use it, Google. And there's tons of articles out there, a lot more than I could tell you. So, but what the talk is going to be about is using the tool in a corporate environment and some of the joy that you get and pushback that you might get from management and users when you do something like that. So let's jump into it, I guess. All right, so you heard pretty much everything. There are my contacts down at the bottom. Until next Tuesday, I am part of that corporate finance infrastructure. Taking a new job after that. So after a few beers, I might be a little bit more honest about some of the details. And welcome to the corporate world. Our lawyers wanted me to say that. So big surprise, I do have a mind of my own. I do use it. So thank you, corporate. All right, so some of the reasons why you would want to do this. And I kind of fell into this. I wish I would have planned it more ahead of time. But it's probably one of the better ways to check and see how your controls are working. You'll find, as you go through some of this stuff, the first couple of passes, you'll find things that are misconfigured, servers that missed configs, poor user habits. And as you collect more data, you may find, and this is something that's been a pet peeve of mine because I have this hate relationship with auditors, in that they push the checkbox and say, okay, and everybody I know has probably seen this, but your minimum password length is usually 8. It has to have some combination of complex characters, whether it be numbers, uppercase, whatever. That was around when I started, and I'm old, yeah, thank you, seasoned. And computers are faster. Things have changed. It's too short. It's not strong enough anymore. So what I ended up finding when I started running this was actual proof. And the hard thing without having the proof is if you go to an auditor and say, look, I feel that 8's too short and we want to bump it. Especially like an internal auditor or a third party that comes in and just does an audit on your company, they're stuck to the rules. They're like, this is best practice, so we got to go with best practice. This gives you some data to go back with and argue that point. And I think we're going to have to start pushing back on some of these auditing rules because they're making us less secure, my opinion. So there's a few challenges that you got to work out before you can even start doing this. And the first one really is to come up with a server. Initially, I thought, well, I want a big GPU box. I'm going to steal somebody's Bitcoin mining machine or whatever. But that in a corporate world is hard sometimes. They're pushing VMs. It's hard to build one-off boxes and a lot of reasons. So I started doing it with a small machine, with just a small VM. It's got no horsepower, and doing some simple rules. And I was still popping passwords. So what I found later on was that this was a benefit, because when I went to management or when I went to a user and I say, hey, look, your password's weak, and they're like, it's not weak. I fit the rules. Like, look, I'm on a little laptop here, and I did it in a couple of days. If I had a really big box, I would do it in a couple of minutes. You sent me to the drag races with a Pinot, and I won. So, I think only old people get that. Pinots were slow, seasoned, and so. Anyways, I thought it was a benefit. Now, as time goes on, and if you start doing more and more machines, especially if you're doing a lot of Unix boxes, that small box is going to have a hard time doing it. But initially, to get you going and to get that conversation going and to get the political wheels turning, it gets you going. And so that was one thing that actually was a positive that I didn't think it was. And let's see. Some of the other things that turn more political as you get into this is who gets to see the raw data, who gets to see the actual passwords. Obviously, some of the admins and stuff will want to see it, or they might be able to change configuration settings to improve things. But you can't go put it on an open file share for everybody to read either. And dealing with different teams, like your Active Directory teams or Unix and Linux data center guys, they may or may not want to give up access to that information to begin with. So there is some management back and forth before you can start all of this. The other thing is to try and build something that's repeatable. The first couple of go-arounds that I did, all gung-ho, I jumped into it, started running, using some different dictionaries, doing some different techniques, and I get done, I'm like, look at all these passwords I got, I'm doing really good, and I'm like, oh, shoot, I forgot everything that I ran. So over time, scripted it, come up with some just basic steps that I've repeated over in time, and that makes consistent month-to-month reports. And I started all of this on the Unix and Linux side mainly because of my background, and I already had access to the shadow files in the data center, so I could begin doing it right away. And one thing that I found, and this comes back to the configuration stuff, I was running across multiple hashing algorithms. So you'd have a single server that would have 4 or 5 different hashing algorithms. Could be default, it could be all the way up to SHA-250 or SHA-512, as much as it supports, and there'd be 4 or 5. Well, when you run John, it can only do one at a time. So what ended up happening was I found one account, and I only had it cracked on half the boxes. Well, the user comes back to me and says, that's great, but I think your script isn't working right because it's the same password everywhere. And I'm like, well, for one, that's a bad practice. But I went back and looked, and sure enough, there was 3 or 4 different, I had to iterate through 3 or 4 different times with different hashing algorithms in order to get all of that. That makes your process a lot longer. And the other thing that happened to me that kind of along the same lines, one of the audits or something that we had stressed that we should push SHA-512 across the board. Well, we did that, and then my runtime started to really suffer because John's got to work so much harder on that hashing algorithm to go through all of the combinations, and it kicked me in the leg, and I didn't even know it was coming, kind of thing. But it was a good thing. At least I saw that we made the change and it was making impact. So it's good. It was nice to see the change across it from a different perspective. And finally, there's a lot of, when you start doing this, there's a lot of conversations that you have with management. They don't understand the tool. They don't understand that auditors could be updated a little bit. So a lot of communication has to go with your upper levels, and I'm talking like your C-level exec types, because they're seeing the reports, and you want to make sure they understand it. The other thing is, as you go out to the users and say change it, they will push back sometimes. And if you've got that C-level exec understanding, there really isn't going to be much argument, because they'll come back and they'll have to change it eventually. So again, consider starting with that small cracking server. I think that helped a lot. That gives it gets you the low-hanging fruit first. It'll tell you if you've got a problem. When I initially, the first time that we ran this, I'll tell you one little story. We had an internal audit. He comes in and he found a weak password on one machine, ended up being the root password on a Linux box, and it was from a VM that somebody built, and it had the default. The guy knew the default root password when the VM is built. Nobody ever went and manually changed it. And he came to me and he says, I found this, and so what are we going to do to fix it? And so we started looking at it, and he goes, well, how many other times did they miss it? And we've got 1,000, 1,500 Linux boxes, and I'm like, we're going to have to check every one of them. The nice thing, we went and checked, there was like 2 other ones. So the guys were doing their job. He missed a couple. That auditor got lucky. But still, that got the ball rolling. And the next, and when you're setting these up and starting to build these things, I would say start with dictionaries. The ones on the web are fantastic, and they'll get you a lot of hits. But make your own. And you can start small with it. I started with the John list that comes with the program, and then just built on it over time. Because I do the vulnerability assessments, and I'm also tied in with the pen testing internally, I had access to some of the pen tests, and when they found a password, or if I was doing one and I found a password, I would just throw it in my dictionary and wouldn't worry about it. If it catches it, it catches it. If it doesn't, it doesn't. It's great. Or if I'm out looking at a machine or something and I find creds in a script, I just throw it in there. I didn't really worry about chasing the guy down to tell him to fix something. I worried more that I'll catch it. If that's really valid, I'll catch it eventually in this process. And that seemed to work out well. Some other tricks that I've picked up over time, use addresses or river names of the state that your company is in or where they're working. A lot of people use like regional areas, baseball teams, football teams, sports teams, that type of thing, but pick that regional area where the people are working from. That works well. In a corporate world, they love to outsource, so pick Hindi, for example, if your outsourcing teams are all in India or Mexico or wherever it is. Go out and get a dictionary for that language, Spanish. Put that in there. Just put it in there and just see what happens. You may not get a hit. You might. That'll get you started. And once you have it set, you'll have, say you crack 10 passwords with that. Now you can look at it and say, okay, now I start to see some patterns maybe. They're putting numbers at the end. Humans, if they're going to have to put a capital letter in, they put it in the front. So you can run your mask switches, do just upper in your first character. Then maybe do a couple of lowercase. Figure, man, maybe they'll put a number or 2 numbers right in the middle, and then they'll put, the rest will be all lowercase. So you can do the mask of that pattern only, and that only runs in about 18 hours on a small box. You're not out there, just run it and see what happens. Try different combinations, move those digits around. There's some different rule sets from CoreLogic has one. It runs a long time, but if you run it with a different rule set on a dictionary, you'll get additional hits. They append and prepend date, time, year, month, all kinds of different tricks. But it ends up, you'll start to see more patterns as you keep doing this over and over again. And then, and that's it, really. That is the process to do that to do that rinse and repeat process, and you'll end up with a set of passwords. Now, what we did or tried to do, and this goes back to having that small server, we set a time limit too. So I said, look, if you're going to give me all the AD credentials, and that was political to get in the first place, but get all the AD credentials, give me 10 days, I'm going to go on my Pinto, and I'm going to see what I can get, and then I just go through all of this stuff, and you only gave me 10 days, and you're only giving me a little server, I shouldn't really get that much if your controls are in place. And if you come, and I usually tried to have a goal of like, if I can get 30% of what I was given, then I feel like I did pretty good. And if I had a GPU box, it would be higher. So that's what we did. It's been working out good so far. The next big trick is working with the users to get things to change. Let's see here. Oh, here, let me switch over to a few examples so it kind of makes a little bit of sense. And sorry, my eyes are seasoned. All right, so you can't see the. Oh shoot! The desktop doesn't flip over. Drink. Let's try this. Oh man, now I'm really. Oh, you did start like this? Did it go? Okay, cool. Oh, thank you. Wow, I can't see anything. All right. All right, so, and you see up at the top, can you see? All right, cool. There's a couple of different mask settings. Those are pretty popular for me. And like I said, I've brought probably 50 or 60 of them that I was running through over and over again. And I had the luxury of having 2 servers, so I took some longer masking, so like 10-character links, and tried those and just let that run on another server. That ran for like a week, but I could merge them back in later while I order ones up at the top. Now, this one little thing at the bottom, because I'm seasoned and because I like to give my kids a hard time, I hate words with friends. But I found a good use for it. There's tons of sites out there with all the legal 3-letter words for words with friends. So, and you could do this with 4 letters, 5, whatever. And so do a little loop here where it starts with a 3-letter word, and then the A is just any character after that, and just loop through it over and over again. You can repeat that with the 4s, and you could put your digits in around that. That was successful. The other thing I'll say, too, when you start doing this, you'll learn a lot of things about your user community that you probably didn't want to know. One funny story, or it's funny to me, I was standing on this guy for weeks and weeks to change his password because I kept cracking it. And he finally, and the password was "fuck you." So I was like, okay, that's nice. And so he finally changes it, and he pops up on the report the next week, and he changed it to "fuck you" with a 2 at the end of it. So I was like, all right, I almost wanted to let that go because it was funny, but yeah, whatever. All right, so that's, here, let me, I'm going to drag, we're going to do one more drag here. And these are all fictitious numbers, but hopefully it'll give you an idea. Tell me when you, oop, too much? There it is. Yay. Yeah, they're awesome. That's why I like my tractor. All right. So the other thing that I'll say is don't do what I did and just go, all the passwords I got, and give it to the CTO and leave. I don't know why. I was like, you can use Excel, you do it. That didn't go over. So I went back to school and learned communication. And it doesn't have to be really tricky, but something like this where you kind of break it down to them, and this is nice and pretty, but it's kind of what you would expect since you're doing all those mask rules with 8s. You're going to get the most in an 8. You start getting 9s and 10s from dictionary words, and then those John rules that are adding on to it. And as you get higher and higher, when you get really high, those are probably from, getting them from a shell script or something like that, and they were long and complex. You just happened to steal it, or you ran Mimikatz, or whatever the case was. And I'll tell you this too, people push back hard. They're like, well, you found that in Mimikatz, that would never happen, so I'm not changing it. It's like, I found it and I shouldn't have, so shut up. But anyways, this makes it really easy for the C-levels. When you come to them and you say, look, here's what we got. There's no, the real data is not here, but this is kind of what we ended up with. And like I said, this is kind of, light. It's perfect. It's easy to explain. In real life, you'll end up with little blips. So you might have, 15 characters spike up or something like that. Instead of managers, they'll pick the spikes. Instead of saying, okay, we've got to act on all of these and get them fixed, they'll go, why is 15 so high? Or, and they'll start asking questions. So have that in the back of your head beforehand. And it's really easy. If you have this spreadsheet all separated out and you know where your counts are and what they are, you can take a look at them. You could have tons of different reasons why. But every once in a while you'll have a spike. Just know what your data is before you go in front of the C's. Let's see, I'm trying to think if there's any other tidbits. I think stats for.
What do you use to generate the stats?
What do,
Do you have the passwords to use it, or you just use Excel or like Python?
so.
How many graphics? Yeah.
Oh, this I just used Excel. And I did start to use Piple. What I found with it, though, it was a little bit of overload for some of the execs. They got caught up with all of the different line items, and it didn't tell the story. So this is the other thing. The story that I wanted to get out of this was we got to get that length longer. And here's why.
So how did you get this data from the raw crack?
Oh, I got you.
What do you use Excel, or what was your process to make this?
All right, so all I did was I took all of the passwords, and then I just wrote a shell script that did word count, and I put the count right next to them, so I had 2 columns, shoved that into Excel, and then just did that. So there you've got it all in there, and then it's easy to go, where are my little blips coming from, all of that kind of stuff, it's all there. I'm really protective of that spreadsheet, like I said before, because only 4 or 5 people in the company should have that, but that's it. I mean, it's really, really easy. It's about a 4-line shell script. It's not a script, really, but so, and that's about that. Now let me see if I can figure out how to get back to. All right. So now that you've embarrassed people, what do you do? And this one I still struggle with because I'm getting a lot of pushback on extending the 8. Nobody wants to do it. They're afraid of third parties coming in, and if your third party is all powerful, they're going to run the show, not me. But I think it doesn't even start with a technical change. It's user training, and you can do some pretty simple things. Tell them, remember remember your favorite song and pick out the first letters of each one, and don't do patterns. And I was even thinking of running through one of these in front of people and going, here's how easy it is. If don't put your capital in the first one. Don't put exclamation points or special characters at the end. Change things up a little bit. And I'm not going to get it that way, not through these math things, unless I get really lucky. And you've made it harder for other people as well. So I really, if in a perfect world, I would say bump the minimum length to about 20 and drop the complexity rules altogether and let it go at that, and then do the user training. And then it becomes really difficult to do these kinds of tricks to get very many passwords. You're going to have a hard time, even with a GPU box, and if it's 20 that you got to go after. That may or may not work politically and depending on your corporate environment, but if else, do the user training, because you can improve it that way. The nice thing with doing this is you can measure it. Now you can just, and auditors and management love trending charts. So over time, you've got numbers that show, hey, look, we've made an improvement, our user training is working, or it's not. The other thing that would help, have your Active Directory team give you a little bit more information about those hashing, about those user IDs. What business unit do they belong in? Maybe you have to focus your training in a certain area or a certain region or whatever, but you can use some of the data that they have, push it together, and make some change out of this. And I think, I'm not this far. I don't know if these are good ideas or bad, but I think that at least I could measure it. And I think, so I'm winding down here, so I don't know what the time is. I'm probably way ahead, but if you guys can eat early, you'll hate me. These are the two links that I lived and breathed when I started all of this. And the first one is from the guys from CoreLogic. They do the Crack Me If You Can stuff out in Vegas. This PDF walks through a lot of the masking techniques, plus some other neat little tricks. That I lived that document for a while. I found it really helpful. And then if you want dictionaries, Skull Security, he's got a ton. And you can pull those at your leisure and begin to play. One other little bit, if you just want to play with this crap at home and you just got on your little laptop, and I know you're all on Linux, make password is a Unix command, so you can make your own password hashes and make your own dictionary, or make your own hashing files to practice with. Obviously you're making the password, you know what's in there, but you can play with it without having to steal somebody else's. Which that was another thing I found helpful. So it's probably really early, but got to be some questions, I hope. Yeah. Because I'm seasoned. To be honest, I picked the tool that I was most comfortable with. Long term, what I had thought was I was going to end up with a combination of both, because I think Hashcat has its advantages in certain areas, and I was hoping to have that monster GPU box, and I would be running both and using them for their advantages. The other thing, JTR has so many, it understands so many different algorithms. And my another long-term hope was I'd love to do this on databases. I know I would destroy them for a while. Or some of the other stuff that's out there, JTR is going to be able to handle a lot of it. So, and I just kind of started there. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and that was something I forgot to mention, I think, a little bit. I had, in my political jumps, I got the hashes from AD, but they didn't give me the user accounts. And they did it for a good reason. They said, well, I could go and change somebody's benefit information or whatever, and I didn't really need that. So I was just working off the hash. So I depended more on my dictionaries and being local to the company. So, sure. Yeah. Right. And that's another thing. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah, so the question is, maybe I should go and some of the other, if we're going to, the length and reduce the complexity, go to the AT team and ask them to set some mask, it's minimum mask, I'm sorry, minimum min length settings to complement everything. The other thing that you just made me think of, too, I thought about even extending the time for changing the password. If we really did see an improvement, probably 90 days is too short. I mean, and the nice thing with that is you could go to the users and say, look, I know I'm making it really long, but I'm taking out some of your other headache, and make it a little bit more agreeable to them. But I think the user training is going to help that more than anything else. So, yeah.
When you talk about this GP box, what do you recommend for
Go out to Google and build a Bitcoin mining box.
let me break it up like video or what do your reporters think for your thoughts?
So I haven't had one, but I mean, from what I've read, I guess NVIDIA, and I was just looking at price and things. It looks to be about $5,000. You could buy a pretty decent box at that point. But like I said, I never got to play with the big hardware. Yeah.
I'm a Bitcoin miner, so I'm
Oh.
So I can turn the box into a
So.
Please don't forget to repeat your question.
Oh, yep. I'm sorry. The question was, what do you recommend in terms of hardware for the larger boxes? And I'm not there. I haven't been lucky enough to work on one yet. I thought I saw it. Yeah. Yeah. With all the Bitcoin mining that's been going on, there's another wealth of information about building a box out there, and anything is going to be a lot better than that small little VM that I use. So it's going to be a big improvement. Anybody else? All right, guys. I'm sorry if I ran too short, but I'm hungry.